I've played over 70 hours of Delta Force, and that's kind of insane for a game that's currently in an alpha test. But I sort of don't want to play anymore, and there's 3 reasons why that I'm going to get into in this video. But you've seen the first one that's in the title and the thumbnail, so let's get straight into that one. Cheating. It feels like there's a lot of cheats in Delta Force right now. When we played in the technical test, I remember a couple of people saying, hey, I think the people at the top of the leaderboards are maybe cheating. And because there were so few people in that technical test, you'd see the same people in your games over and over again. So some of the people that you'd seen had been accused of cheating, you'd come across them in their games, and I felt it was kind of hard to work out for myself whether they were cheating or not. Yes, they would kill me, yes, they were at the top of the leaderboards, but it never seemed that suspicious. And over the course of the first kind of week or two of the alpha, I saw a few people saying that there were cheaters in Delta Force, and I was like, I'm not really sure. I haven't seen anything that weird. It's kind of hard to tell because the time to kill is so fast anyway. Sometimes people might just get a lucky headshot, or you might get shot by 2 people at once. It was really hard to work out. But then over the last couple of days, I've definitely seen some cheaters. There was one person that we saw cheating that we reported them and they got banned within 2 minutes. And it said they got banned for 10 years, which I think is probably a good thing if they were definitely cheating. But it seems a little bit odd that they got banned immediately after we reported them, almost like it's an automated thing based on player reports. And we all know how that could easily be abused. So since that happened, since we reported someone and they immediately got banned for 10 years, I've been a little bit reluctant to report too many people because, as I said earlier, it's really hard to work out if people are cheating. There's been a few times where people have popped out from behind cover. I didn't think they knew where I was, but then they immediately shot me and killed me. That seems fairly suspicious. There's been a few times where people have been using weapons that I don't think are that accurate, but they've managed to shoot like 3 shots and all of them have gone into my head, or all of them have gone straight into my chest, and I've died really quickly. That sometimes seems a little bit suspicious. Occasionally you'll see people doing things like jumping around corners and then still being able to hit all their shots. One of the big problems with any FPS game, and this has been true since like back in the days of Quake and Unreal Tournament, is that really good players look almost exactly like average players who are cheating. There's not that much in it, and especially when you don't have like extended kill cams, you can't watch them for an extended period of time. You've just got the brief little look at what happened when you died, and then a little bit of information in terms of, you know, where did they hit you and how much damage they did with each shot. It's kind of hard to work out for sure whether someone's cheating or not. But if you go into Google and you search for Delta Force cheats, and you specify that you want Delta Force Hawk Ops cheats, because there are lots of cheats back for the old Delta Force. Remember when games just used to have cheats? So when you were kind of done with a game or you wanted to mess around, you could just put God mode on or no clip and just fly around the map and see everything. That was kind of cool. I kind of missed that. But anyway, we're talking about PvP cheats, which is obviously a terrible thing. So if you search for cheats for this game, there's definitely a lot being advertised. There's definitely people who have managed to create services selling cheats for this game. And as we know from games like Call of Duty or Fortnite, if there's people playing a game, there will be people selling cheats for it. It's a very lucrative market. It works based on player population. The more people there are playing the game, the more people there are that are willing to cheat, that are prepared to cheat, the more people that are willing to pay, and that means the more it's worth investing into developing cheats. You know, it's worth some of these companies, and they are companies creating some of these cheats, hiring very, very skilled developers in order to find ways to break the game. So are there cheats in Delta Force? Yes, absolutely 100%. There definitely are cheats and there definitely are people using them. Is everyone you're coming up against cheating? Probably not. I think there's probably quite a small percentage of people who would be willing to cheat in an alpha for a game. That's like so weirdly antisocial and just odd to me that I don't believe that many people would be willing to pay for cheats for it. Like, you're not gaining anything. It's not like there's long-term progress you're going to get. this alpha could end basically at any time over the next couple of weeks, and then everything you've gained has been lost. So I assume a lot of the people who are cheating right now are actually people who are developing these cheats, people who are working on them, because they have an incentive to try it out now, where they can just get a free alpha code from lots of various sources, or I think you can buy them for like a couple of euros apparently, and then they can go into the game, try it out, and if the account gets banned, it doesn't matter too much. But if they get away with it, that teaches them something, you know, to develop their cheats for when the game releases properly. And this is going to be a huge problem, even if there's only a very small percentage of players cheating, like I think there is in games like Warzone as well. It still pretty much ruins the game for other people, because if you know other people could be cheating, then every time you die, rather than thinking, okay, how could I do that differently? How could I approach that differently? It's super easy to just write it off as, oh, they're cheating, and then get frustrated by that. And this is how lots of people feel about games. You know, like I keep going back to Warzone because that obviously has a big cheating problem at the moment. It's really irritating when you don't know if someone else is cheating. You know, if there's cheats that make it so aim lock isn't completely, you know, 100% aim botting, that instead there's kind of a soft aim lock where they can turn it on with a foot switch or something like that, then it's really hard to tell if people are definitely cheating, especially when you watch some content creators and streamers and pro players playing who aren't cheating, but it looks like they are because their aim is so good. Once it's in your head that people could potentially be cheating, everyone who's better than you looks like they're cheating. If they're doing something that you can't do, like hitting all of their shots or having better situational awareness than you, it's easy for your brain to just say, oh, that person's cheating. That's simpler, easier to face up to, rather than thinking, oh, that person was better than me at the video game. And that's kind of what's happened to me with Delta Force. It's got to the point where I ran into cheaters a couple of times, and now I'm starting to think, well, what's the point of going into these games? Because there's a chance that the people I'm coming up against are cheating, and they're just going to kill me and take all my stuff. It's worse in a game like Delta Force than it is in something like Warzone, because in Warzone, if you die, all you've lost is the time in that game, which is very frustrating, but it doesn't really matter that much. In Delta Force, especially if you're going into like Space City where you have to take in 350,000 credits worth of gear, it really sucks if then you get killed by a cheater and you've lost all of that. Like, that hurts quite a lot because that's something that probably took you a lot of other time to try and build up, and now you've ended up losing it all because of something that was kind of entirely out of your control. It completely stops you wanting to play the game. And that kind of leads me on to the second reason that I'm not really playing Delta Force anymore. And that's that it's had exactly the same problem as Call of Duty has had that I've talked about many times, where the people who are quite casual players of Delta Force have basically stopped playing. Whether it's because it's an alpha and their progression doesn't count, whether it's because they kind of did the missions they wanted to do and then the next set of stuff is a little bit too hard, or whether it's just because they're getting killed by cheaters or very, very good players, I think a lot of people who aren't very good at Delta Force are just kind of quitting. And then that leaves the people who are playing, who are super hardcore, they know the best weapons to use, they build up all of the best stuff, they know the best routes, the best little head glitches and things like that. They know how to exploit the game, and often they'll be in squads, so they're working together. And that means the average player skill in Delta Force has shot up exponentially, I would say. With Call of Duty, at least there's millions of people playing it. There's loads of people that play Call of Duty that don't follow anything about it online. It's just a game that they've played for years. So when a new one comes out, they'll load it up and give it a go. And that means normally you'll find some newer players or some players who are at least at your level who you can play against. And when skill-based matchmaking's working, when there's lots of people playing, then you kind of get a fair game. In Delta Force right now, if you're playing something like Space City, so you're playing on those more difficult modes, there's nearly every game going to be at least one squad who is incredibly good at it. And unless you want to devote dozens of hours to the game, learning every little sort of secret about it, you want to build up and get all of the very best gear, you know, you want to have orange or red gear in every single slot, you're not going to be able to catch up with them. Just by sort of playing casually, you're not going to be able to catch up with them. So then it's like, well, what's the point of going up against them then? They're not doing anything wrong. Don't get me wrong. The people who are really good at the game, they're not doing anything wrong. It's fine that they're there. It's just that if you're not prepared to make this kind of the only game that you're playing, you're not going to stand a chance against them. And when the player population is super low and it doesn't seem to be much or any skill-based matchmaking, there's a decent chance they're going to be in your games and they're going to kill you and they're going to take all your stuff. So for me, when I'm streaming Delta Force, I tend to play solo. I tend to go in solo. I just don't know many other content creators who are playing this at the moment who want to squad up. So I'm often just going in with randoms who a lot of the time don't communicate. You know, I'm in Europe, so we all speak a lot of different languages. And that means that I'm getting absolutely destroyed more often than not. At the beginning of the alpha and during the technical test, was having a good time, could fairly easily, you know, hold my own against other squads and things like that. But now the skill gap has got pretty big. I went for a holiday for a week in the middle of this test, which probably didn't help too much. So some people got far ahead of me. Some people got much more experience than me. That skill gap has kind of been created now. And as a solo player going up against skilled squads, I just don't feel like I stand a chance at all. And I don't want to make this the only game I play to practice enough to try and get as good as them. So just like Warzone, the best players will stick around and they'll keep playing because they're having a good time killing people. And the players who are having a bad time of it, the players who aren't doing very well, will just find other things to play. And that's kind of what I'm doing. Now, I did say at the beginning of the video that there's 3 reasons that I've kind of stopped playing Delta Force. And the third one is the one that I feel like they probably could do more about, but I don't think they will. And that's that the game has kind of got boring. With all of these extraction shooters that have come out, so like DMZ, The Cycle, Grey Zone Warfare, Arena Breakout Infinite, and this, they all seem to kind of follow the same pattern. That when you play it, the first 10 to 20 hours is absolutely awesome. You're learning new mechanics, you're exploring new places, and the missions are quite exciting because you get different types of missions. Maybe sometimes you'll be trying to grab an item, sometimes you'll be trying to kill an NPC, sometimes you'll be trying to use a particular weapon to take out some players. It kind of gives you a little bit of variety in the way that you're doing it, while you're also experiencing lots of other new things. Then at some point the grind shows itself. You realise that a lot of the missions are just the same. That's what killed Grey Zone Warfare completely for me, is that when you're playing Grey Zone Warfare, the first 3 or 4 locations where you do missions, it feels like something fresh. Each location is pretty different, the missions are fairly varied, and then you go to another location and it's the same missions as the one before. And then another location, and it's the same missions as the one before. And you start seeing the patterns. You start seeing how, yes, they might say there's 150 missions, but if like 120 of those missions are based on ones that you've done before, it gets a little bit tedious. And this happened to DMZ. Remember how many DMZ missions were things like drop off 15 bandages in a sort of, what do they call it, a dead drop, or kill 15 players from 150 meters away using an LMG. And the first time you did something like that, it was kind of, okay, cool, I can work out how to do this. And then the 5th time you had to do a mission like that, it was just, oh no, it's another one of these ones. Now, obviously, the problem is kind of built into the genre of they can't make infinite interesting missions, they can't make enough content, and I imagine the amount of time it takes to create a mission is considerably more than the amount of time it takes to complete a mission, which means the players are always going to end up getting ahead of the developers and just run out of things to do. So while I'm by no means at the end of the missions in Delta Force, I'm kind of at the end of the missions that are new as far as I can tell. I'm just repeating the same missions over and over again. They change the location a little bit, or the item I need to pick up, or the weapons, but it's the same sort of thing all the time. It's always go kill AI here, go kill players with this weapon, build this particular type of gun, pick up these items or drop off these items there. There's only so many types of missions, like templates for missions, and they're getting very, very repetitive. And in the alpha, there's only 2 and a bit maps. You know, Space City you can't play in the normal mode, so, and it's very, very small compared to the other maps, it feels like. But there's 2 and sort of a bit maps, maybe 3 maps, and it just feels like I'm done with them. Like, there's nothing else to explore. There's no new mission types I'm looking forward to being able to do. The AI has got a little bit tedious to fight against. You know, there's not that many types of AI, and they don't really pose that much of a threat. Just like DMZ and Grey Zone Warfare before it, it's got to the point where the only really interesting thing to do is to fight other players, is to do that PvP, But there's the problems that I talked about earlier in the video, that there's some people cheating and there's a lot of people who are incredibly good at the game now, so the PvP isn't that exciting either. This is all compounded with one of the biggest problems that the game has faced that I've talked about before, and that's that only 5 teams seem to go into each map at the beginning of the game, and there's generally quite a lot of fighting in the first 5-10 minutes, whereas players come against each other, and that's getting worse as spawns are worked out, again, just like it was in DMZ, and that means the map feels weirdly empty towards the end of the match. And sometimes not even towards the end of the match. I've had matches where, especially when we've got the Mandel brick, we've killed another team to get the Mandel brick, and then you have to defend it for like 3 minutes or something, 5 minutes maybe, and no other teams have come around, and we just haven't seen any other teams for the entire rest of the match. I saw a YouTube comment on one of my videos where someone was saying, oh, that's weird, why would it be a bad thing if you can wipe the servers in a game? But it is a bad thing, because then you're essentially just playing a PvE game where you're running around a map just fighting bots, and the bots aren't interesting to fight against, as I said. And so essentially you're just doing like loot crates, you're opening up boxes and hoping you'll get a lucky roll and get a decent item. And for me, that's not compelling gameplay, that's not particularly interesting. There's a few ways they could get around this problem. You know, they could have players spawning into a map later on in the game, so rather than it being, okay, you've got the same, whatever it is, 25 minutes for everybody from the same point, you get 25 minutes from when you join the game, but the match is kind of, you know, persistent. It keeps going like it does in something like Tarkov, and so while you're playing, there's always the threat of new players possibly coming in. Maybe that's one way they could handle it. Or they could have a lot more interesting AI to fight against. So lots have been made. I did a video about the bots who pretend to be players. They could have a lot more players like that, especially when the real players have been killed. Just have a few more bots adding in, maybe some more difficult bots as the match goes on, so it gets a little bit more dangerous. Maybe change the map somehow as the match goes on, so new bits open up, more dangerous AI come in. I think that was something they did with DMZ. I think at some places there was sort of more armoured AI and things like that would come in towards the end of the game just to try and keep it a little bit interesting as you go towards exfil. And then that kind of leads on to a final problem. So I guess I've ended up talking about 5 problems here. But the final problem is that the end of every match of Delta Force is pretty boring, because the exfil is just so boring. I think we got spoiled by DMZ, where a helicopter would actually come in, you would need to try and defend the area while you waited for it, and then you need to get on board and try and defend yourselves while the helicopter was taking off. That led to some pretty exciting moments, especially on the final extraction, where you knew other teams would be going for it, and you'd be trying to work out where they were going to be coming from, how you could set up your defenses, or you'd be doing a last-minute dash to try and get there and break through another team's defenses. That was pretty exciting. In Delta Force, all that happens is you go somewhere, and then a counter counts down, and then you disappear. And that's it. It feels a lot less cinematic, it feels a lot less exciting, and it's quite anticlimactic for the end of a game. So while you're playing a game, you don't really have much to look forward to. Like, generally, the kind of cadence seems to be for me, if I don't get killed, that I drop into a game, we have a kind of exciting 5-10 minutes where we're trying to work out where other players are, we do a few fights, and if we win those fights, the next 10-15 minutes of the match are just really boring. It's just us wandering around a map, occasionally killing AI, opening a few boxes to see what we get, and then going to a place to wait for a countdown before we just disappear. And that's kind of it. That's not terribly fun. So yeah, while I was singing the praises of Delta Force and I was having an awesome time with it, I think after 70 hours I'm pretty much done. I'll probably have another look at it when the full game comes out. You know, I'll be interested to check out the other maps and see if they do something more interesting with the missions. But for now, I think I'm done with it. I don't think there's much left in the game for me. And I'm feeling a bit like I'm kind of done with extraction shooters, because we've had quite a few now, like DMZ, Grey Zone Warfare, The Cycle, this, and all of them have been following exactly the same pattern, like I said earlier, where they're super fun for the first 10-20 hours, and then they just trail off and they get quite boring. And to be honest, that might not be a bad thing. Like, getting 10 or 20 hours out of a game is pretty good as it stands. Getting 70 hours out of it, well, I've probably enjoyed a good sort of 50 hours of that. That's really solid. That's not a bad thing at all. I don't think we should always think every game has to be a forever game, but it is a bit worrying for the developers of Delta Force if people are burning out on the game before it's even come out. Like, that's not good for their long-term prospects. I haven't spent a penny on this game so far, so they haven't got anything out of their development time, and I'm worried that by the time they release it, a lot of people will already be done with the game. Anyway, let me know what you think in the comments below. Am I being too harsh on this? Are there things that they could do to kind of turn this around a little bit? Or is there something that another Extraction game does better that you think I should take a look at? Let me know in the comments. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like, and I'll see you for the next one. Goodbye.